Coming up on Random Fit, Wendy Batts, along with my co-host Ken Miller, we're going to talk about behind every step, the important role of the Achilles tendon.
On this episode, Wendy and I will talk about Achilles. What is it? How to maintain good health and things we can do to make sure that we stay away from injury. So, hope you like the episode, everybody. And like, follow, subscribe, download, and let us know what you think. Take care and happy listening.
You're listening to Random Fit with hosts Wendy Batts and Ken Miller, winner of a Gold Markham Award for Digital Media.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Random Fit. I am Wendy Batts here with my co-host and friend, Ken Miller. Ken, how's it going?
Great, Wendy. I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I've had to think about that for a second. How are you?
I am doing excellent. This week, we're actually going to talk about this really extremely important tendon that we have been hearing a lot about, unfortunately, on the news, and one that's very vital for upright movement. And basically, anytime our foot hits the ground, it's plays an important role. So we're going to talk about behind every step and the critical role that the Achilles tendon plays on that role. And I'm ready to dive in. Ken, how about you?
I am, because I have a friend who has a special interest in this topic, considering he just tore his Achilles. I mean, that's the unofficial situation with my buddy, but it's strong suspicion that that is the case. So he's going to be listening to this episode once, if not twice or three times. So yeah, I don't know about you, Wendy, but I'm sure you've had clients, you've had patients, friends
No,
that have had
I have
issues
never
with
had
this.
a client, by the way, but I know people who,
But you
if
know
they were
people,
my
yeah.
clients, would not have been in that situation. But unfortunately, I mean, we see it. We've seen it a lot, especially in basketball this season.
Yeah.
Injuries that are one right after another, and of course, when we think about an Achilles tendon, especially a rupture, and someone tore their Achilles. So we want to talk about what the actually Achilles tendon is. It is basically that strong fibrous band of connective tissue that connects your two key muscles. So your gastrocnemius and your soleus, which are your two calf muscles, that blends into this tendon that attaches to your heel bone. So they'll call it sometimes the calcaneal tendon because your heel bone is called your calcaneus. And oftentimes when we have really tight calves, we don't have motion in our heel bone, which goes as if you kind of play around with your foot, your heel bone should move. And if it's very sticky or it doesn't move because it's very stiff, then there's a lot of like tendons and muscles and everything that surround that when it gets locked down can cause big time issues, especially when you're doing something that is requiring you to do this like explosive repetitive motion, and your body isn't prepared for that. So that's unfortunately why we're seeing more of these ruptures and tears.
And I mean, you mentioned what's above the heel bone or the calcaneus, right? With the Achilles, and as it relates to the calf muscles, you talked about the gastroc and the soleus. But if you actually stream down, if you go downstream from the heel down to the forefoot, you also have those muscles under the foot, right, that make up the foot arch. So that's the other part. So when you talk about tightness in the calf, just as important and really doesn't get as much attention through it all is also the foot muscles as well, just because of the connection through that heel bone. So that tension is going to be shared both up the Achilles tendon as well as downward from the Achilles tendon. So I don't know, Wendy, if you've ever done anything towards paying attention to the foot, but
Oh, yeah.
that's a spot that gets ignored quite a bit.
So there is this muscle, way too much information. But if you look on the bottom of your foot, there's that big tendon that's kind of right underneath the ball of your foot that goes underneath the medial arch that you're talking about. It's called your flexor hallucis longus. So people will call it the the FHL for short, just because who wants to say that all day? But yes, I mean, that's the one when I talk about the first big, the big toe being one of the most important joints of your body, especially if you do a lot of pushing off. That obviously crosses that area too and goes into your calf. And so when you're looking at all these little muscles that you're talking about, Ken, obviously that make up the saddle, the things that have to happen throughout that go around your Achilles tendon, which again is that one that I'm talking about. There's a lot of things that are happening at the foot, and there's a lot of little bones in there too that can easily get kind of stuck or locked down just because of the shoe wear or just because of tightness and what we do on the day to day. So when you're thinking about, your calf muscles, you've got to think about the force that your calves transmit, especially as we're propelling ourselves forward. So when you're thinking of the Achilles tendon, as you point your toe down, we call that plantar flexion, right? So when you're pointing your toe down, obviously the Achilles tendon is helping with that. When you're pushing off, like off the ground, when you're walking and running and jumping, again, your Achilles tendon is making that happen with your calves. And then of course, climbing the stairs, again, you're raising onto your toes, calf raises, things like that. So those are the force transmissions that are happening throughout that tendon. And that's a lot, guys, especially because think of your body weight and then the excess force of jumping and learning to slow yourself down. We've done a lot of podcasts on Random Fit talking about deceleration and being able to control that force. And if you don't have control, that's when we start to see, unfortunately, some of these negative things happening to that tendon. And the rehab is, it's going to take some time.
It takes, and age is a factor when it comes to the rehab side of things. So
age is a factor always, Ken. Always.
Age, weight, conditioning, hydration, nutrition, all of that. They're all factors. But when you talk about force transmission, so what does it mean, right? You talked about climbing stairs, jumping, but take something as simple as walking. So when, just the other day I was talking to my client about their Achilles, and he was having this little issue with his Achilles. Again, we're not talking about injury on this episode, but he had a little something going on. But I had to explain to him, he's like, why am I feeling this? I mean, I'm doing the same things. I go, well, you did change one thing. You're walking more. You're significantly walking more now than you were 3 months ago. And I also had to tell him, I told him to bump up the intensity a little bit. So instead of walking casually, I should say, I told him walk more with a brisk pace, work on your posture, eyes up, head up, looking straight ahead, good arm swing, but pick up your pace. And then he started to feel a little something around that medial side of the Achilles. And he goes, I didn't do anything different. I go, no, you actually did. And as innocuous as it may be, walking is a big tension producer through the Achilles. So it's not just about jumping and climbing stairs or even change of direction, which the Achilles has definite role in all of those. But just watch yourself walk. If you were to watch somebody walk across the street and you're watching them from the side, you'll see that as that foot hits the ground and they're rolling from heel to toe, that hip is swinging over that foot. So as the hip is coming over, that foot is, as you said, Wendy, it's going through that ankle dorsiflexion. So the toe is getting closer to the knee on the front side, and that's where that force is transmitted. So when we talk to our clients, or if you're an exerciser who's listening to both Wendy Batts and I, Ken Miller, here on Random Fit, there is definite tension that's coming across the bottom of the foot, up the Achilles, into the calf. And of course, all that kind of loads up all the way through the hip. But something as innocent, I guess we'll call it, is as walking, either increasing the distance, increasing the time, increasing the speed, that's definitely going to put more tension on the Achilles. So just so you know, even something just as simple as walking, tension is definitely being transmitted through the Achilles. So don't think like you have to be an athlete, running, jumping, sprinting. It's just walking puts tension through that whole lower leg complex.
Well, and I think what you're talking a lot about too is when we're thinking about the shock absorption of the tendon and the way that the energy stores it. So think, guys, when your foot hits the ground, you're storing the elastic energy. So when you make contact, that's the eccentric load, right? Your body's coming down onto it. So you're slowing yourself down as you approach the ground. Well, then as you push off, so you're pushing off into that walking pattern that you were just talking about, that's releasing more of a concentric contraction, meaning you're producing the force to move yourself or propel yourself forward. So yeah, you just talked about force transmission. That's a huge critical role. Well, now we just talked about shock absorption and the energy storage in order to store what we need in order to make that movement happen. But I think a lot of times too, we really don't think about we talk about balance and stability a lot. We do in our programming. I mean, we have a section of just balance because we're really looking at the foot and ankle complex. If you have a weak arch in your foot, like if you look at your foot when you're just glancing down and you see that you have an arch in your foot, then you don't have flat feet. But yet when you stand, if you notice that those arches disappear, then you just have a lot of weakness within your foot complex. And that can be changed, but it takes a lot of time. Just like when you go to the gym, if you want to see your body change, you have to force yourself to work on balance and force yourself to build that arch back up, especially because you should have one. There's not a lot of people are born with flat feet. Are there? Yes, there are people that from birth have never had an arch, and their doctor will say you have a child with flat feet. Unfortunately, more people are like, oh, I just have flat feet, but they don't. It's just what they think they do because they just look at what their foot's doing when it's standing. So you want to think too that when we're talking about the Achilles tendon, it supports your ankle stability within the foot and ankle complex. And especially when you're doing any kind of weight bearing movements, which is just standing, especially balancing, doing anything. But if you start to think about adding speed and you don't have good foot alignment or good arch alignment, and you don't have strength within your foot and your calves are tight, think about the tug of war that's going on within that tendon that's crossing, like we just said, from the calves and the heel that's no longer doing what it's supposed to do by stabilizing and moving. Then when you're cutting and you're pivoting and you're changing directions and stuff, we're going to end up having more tension placed upon that tendon, that if you just start to do some balance and stability work, you could actually, that shouldn't be an issue because you're working on a program to help that or keep it from happening, if you will.
Yeah. So I think you're saying there, Wendy, do more single leg work.
Did I say that? Yes, I think I did.
Yeah, and again, it's easy to talk about moving, going from A to B, being in one place, moving into another space. But we also have to think about what level of control do we have just standing there. And again, with that same conversation with my client about his Achilles and what's going on, one of the things that we had to talk about was the fact that when it comes to the gait cycle, just walking across the room, when you're walking, 85% of your gait cycle, that's you taking one step in front of the other, 85% of that gait cycle is on one foot. The only time when you have both feet on the ground when walking is that 15% when you have that toe that's about to lift off and that heel just that had just hit the ground. And then everything else, once that toe is off and you're taking that swing phase, that's when you're on one foot. And you're on one foot 85% of that gait cycle. Now, when you're running, and this is the other thing I had to tell them, because it's like, well, if we can't master walking first when it comes to managing tension through the Achilles, then we really don't have a right to run yet, because now the intensity increases, right? You have the impact. You can have up to 12 times body weight when jumping, right? But when you're now running, 100% of your running cycle is on one foot. So that control that you mentioned, Wendy, being on one foot, that single-legged control through the foot and the ankle, if you're a runner, though you may not have experienced any pain, just think of all the stress that you're putting through the foot and ankle. And if it is a matter of now thinking from a preventative standpoint or risk management, if you will, these are the things that we need to start looking at when it comes to the health of the Achilles, health of the calf, health of the foot, and managing flexibility and range of motion.
Well, and I mean, and like I said, a lot of times we've seen a lot of this on the news. Unfortunately, I mean, I'm not saying it just happens in basketball players, but we did see almost 2 back-to-back, which we hadn't seen in a really long time. And, when I started looking at some of the research and I saw that it was 12.5 times body weight when you're sprinting. I mean, think about how much you're sprinting and then cutting and changing direction just in that one sport alone, not including things like lacrosse and soccer and all of these other, and pickleball and tennis. I mean, and I want to go into a little more detail, Ken, on why, when we're looking at the Achilles tendon, why is that so prone to injury over some of the other tendons that we have within our body? But before we do that, I would just want to say that this week's episode of Random Fit is brought to you by NASM One, the membership for trainers and coaches. Members enjoy unlimited access to hundreds of career resources. Get the Edge app to schedule and program clients. Enjoy half off all certifications and specializations. Access free CEUs and more. All of this for just $35 a month. Go to nasm.org/membership to learn more about NASM One. So, Ken, when we talk about the Achilles tendon and we're talking about it, right? I mean, it is something that we're hearing more and more about. Why is it prone to injury?
Pick a point, right? This one. yeah, that one. So to already think about what we've been talking about, it's just because that is that transitional spot between the ankle and the leg, right? Or the foot and the leg. So that's a lot of force coming through one specific area. So that's a big part, right? And you brought up pickleball. You mentioned pickleball, and Wendy, I'm in that age and demographic of people that started being athletic later in life. So from that standpoint, I hear it all. I hear the complaints. Oh, my hips, my knees, my foot, my ankle, my heel, and all that stuff. But I'm thinking, listen, you haven't done anything since before you started having kids. You haven't done anything since, you got the last 2 promotions. And think about it. You're going from your computer, your desk, your couch, from doing nothing to, you're going from 0 to 60 in 2 weeks, and your body was not meant to take on that much load that fast. So I think the idea of being active and being agile and changing directions and doing something your body hasn't done adds a lot of stress to that one little structure. I think that's one big part when you start to look at the Achilles. I don't want to say it's a rash of Achilles injuries, but it's up there.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I wanted to kind of dive deeper into, when I was like looking into it, because I'm always asking, and we tell people this too, ask the whys, why?
Yeah.
And it's like, when I really started to kind of dive deeper, when you're looking at the Achilles itself, it has this is what I pulled for some of the research. It has poor blood supply, especially 2 to 6 centimeters above the heel. So that is the most common rupture zone. And I didn't know that. I mean, I just thought the Achilles tendon, but I didn't know there was a common rupture zone. So it's about 2 to 6 centimeters above the heel. So if you look at your own and you can see that little area, that's usually where most of the ruptures do occur. And it's really degeneration over time. So when there's been a lot of stress over a repetitive motion with not good alignment, with overactive calves, with not good movement within the whole foot complex, over time, it's just like the rest of our bodies, wear and tear is going to start to cause tendinopathy, starting to cause more pain in the foot. Some people get neuropathy, meaning the nerves and their foot goes numb. There's a lot of things that start to happen when we're not careful. And just think, when you start adding high loads of sudden or explosive movements, such as sprinting or changing direction or crossing the street, and you haven't, like you just said, you've been very sedentary and not really training for those types of movement patterns, and you have poor alignment within the foot complex, you're setting yourself up for failure. And that's why we wanted to talk about this, because I'm not saying it's an easy fix. I'm not saying, if you do what we're saying, this can help. But I think just the awareness, because I learned something new all the time. And when I saw there's the rupture zone, I was like,
yeah.
So I find it fascinating. But if you've ever seen it, it's really hard to watch. Because if you have a full blown tear, guys, you'll actually see, when you've got the two calves on each side, right? You've got the two balls that you see on the calf complex, and then you see the tendon. When that tendon ruptures, if it ruptures both, you'll literally see the calf almost like a blind go up. It's like it just, and it just becomes two balls at the top, and your foot is just dangling. It has no control, and it's really hard to watch. And literally on the surgical side, they have to go in, refine the two, and then come and tack it back to the heel. And that's why you're in a boot. You're not able to move. There's a lot of steps to get you back into the motions that you're used to doing on the day to day, let alone on the explosive side. So, it's one of those things where if you're not taking care of your calves and you're not actually working on your foot strength and alignment, you really need to start doing it now, because these ruptures are occurring more and more at younger ages than ever before as well.
Right. And I think that example of playing pickleball after not doing anything, sitting at your desk in your chair. But I think the bigger side of that statement is the fact that you have somebody who's now older, right? They're not in their teens, they're not in their 20s, maybe now they're in their 30s, they're in their 40s, and now they're trying to be active. So you're talking about, a decade or two of rigidity, right? That buildup of that stiffness within that Achilles tendon, and now you're trying to be active. And if age is a big factor, especially when you add age and a sedentary lifestyle and a weight gain, because like you said, Wendy, 12 and a half times your body weight. Now, if you put 10 more pounds from the last time that you tried to sprint, right? That's 120 pounds more pressure, 125 more pounds of pressure that's coming through the Achilles. So those are things to be aware of too. If you're somebody who's you're not a spring chicken anymore, but now consider how mobile you are, consider your age, your timeline you are in your life, and what it is that you're actually physically trying to do. So those are all factors. Well, those are some of the factors that go into it, but age is a situation we need to consider. And we have to eat a piece of humble pie and make sure that we take the right steps.
Well, and I think too, when you're looking at some of the root causes and some of these different contributing factors, like you just said, obviously there's the sports of somebody that's sedentary, obviously age that you just mentioned, but I think it's also really important to think about, specializing in a sport at a young age, and that repetitive stress that you're putting on your body. You're doing these high impact movements or sprints or changing directions. And if you focus on a single sport, which I know we've talked about, the importance of doing multi sports, especially until you hit a certain age. We had Grant Hill, obviously, that joined us on one of our random fits. And he was saying he wouldn't let, or his father, who was an NFL player, would not let him play football and, just football until he didn't choose his quote sport until he was like 16 or 17, because he wanted him to be good at different sports. And that's super important too, for our muscles to learn how to move in different directions under different stresses on different turfs or fields or courts or whatever it may be. But when you're doing the same thing over and over and over, you're getting this micro trauma that's constantly developing. And if you're not taking care of it right by eating right, recovering right, and making sure you've got good alignment, that's why I think some of this we're seeing at a younger age is because parents are putting people. I mean, my kid just plays baseball like fall and spring, but they wanted him to play in the fall. I mean, in the summer as well. And we were like, no, we need a break. So we did everything besides baseball.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, and that's important. I did the same thing with my son. He loves baseball, so spring, that's his sport. But then he's done. He's with the basketball team right now, and baseball is knocking on the door.
Oh, we just had tryouts. I hear you.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But
so
I think,
keeping it diverse. Your point there, Wendy, is right on.
Yeah. And I think footwear too, when we talk about sports, but it's not even, people were transitioning into barefoot training. And I think barefoot training is important. I just talked about the importance of training the arch of your foot. And if you wear a super supportive shoe, your arches get lazy, right? Because the arch is built into the shoe. So you really don't have to really stress or work those muscles. But if you go from that into an extreme to no arch support and you have weak muscles, then you're obviously not setting yourself up to success or for success. And they'll tell you, even in the directions of barefoot shoes, like you want to wear them a little bit at a time until your foot starts to adapt and you start to build strength back into that arch for better alignment. But, you know, if you're in a certain sport where you've got a lot of ankle movement or cutting and your foot's not strong, you know, are low tops better than high tops or mid tops? I mean, all of that's going to be important to discuss with the coaches. It all depends on the sport. I don't think one shoe's better than another, but obviously if you need some certain tennis shoe for tennis court, you should be wearing a tennis shoe and not just a running shoe that you're going to go play tennis in, because that's not supporting the actual type of court, if you will, because they make certain shoes for certain sports for a very specific reason. And it's to ensure good footing, alignment, and then obviously to try to help where there needs to be stability in the shoe. Hopefully it's being provided by getting a good pair of shoe for that particular sport.
I think a big point to that, Wendy, is when it comes to clients. I mean, and I know you get your share of clients that ask you, well, you look at their shoes and like, are you wearing a running shoe to a workout session? And like, you may not say it like that, but the one thing that I'll say is like, well, do you have another pair of footwear, athletic footwear that you can wear when you're in here? Because you get those clients that will come in. I mean, and they're new clients, and you know, they haven't been educated otherwise, but they might come in a running shoe with a very thick heel, very elevated heel. But if I want you to do, let's say, lateral or turning movements, your shoe is built for you to go in one direction, and that's straight ahead, right? So making sure that the footwear, not like what you're talking about, Wendy, with the amount of heel raise, but also considering the amount of cushioning, right? The amount of padding or lateral, which will kind of help you figure out, you know, are you better able to go lateral? Is it even safe to go laterally or even turning direction? So I think that consideration for footwear, especially if you go to a good shoe store, especially an athletic shoe facility, that maybe they watch your gait. Maybe you try on a few different pairs of shoes, and if you share with the representative or the sales person, and then you tell them what you're going to do, they might have some recommendations. So they're not just there to sell shoes. A lot of times they are educated. I've got a really good athletic foot store around where I live, and they actually know what they're very educated on the shoes and what it is you're trying to do. And you know the key is, you know, try out different brands, different shoe styles, because they might, like what you said, Wendy, with if you're playing tennis, I mean, there's pickleball shoes, there's tennis shoes, there's racquetball shoes, there's the sport is the sport, but try a shoe, whether or not the shoe is labeled for that sport. Try it out. I have clients that try different styles of shoes, and some actually help relieve some of the tension they might experience through the Achilles, calf, and the foot.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think one of the final one that people, I think, don't think about, because I once it kind of came up, I'm like, oh yeah, that one's a big one. I think sometimes we forget about medications. As a trainer, we get all the medications in the very beginning when we're doing the subjective information and we're sitting down with our client, we're learning more about, you know, what their goals are, but then also their health history, family history, and any kind of meds that they're on. And guys, it's really important to think there are certain antibiotics and different types of steroids that are out there that can actually start to weaken your tendons. And so if somebody is sedentary, they're on these certain types of medications, you want to look at those and make sure that you're familiarizing yourself with those, because again, hopefully, if you notice that you've done an assessment, there are some compensations based on those pattern movements that maybe aren't, or the movement patterns, the quality of movement's not there. We're not going to have them go and do something explosive or running and cutting. But if we know that they have weak arches, we know that they're going to be putting a lot of stress on it, we're not going to be doing some of these metabolic blasts that we talked about in the very beginning, because we need to ensure that we've got good alignment. And it's not just alignment and making sure that the right muscles are firing at the right time. We also need to make sure that we have good tendon, you know, the tendon health the muscular health, the recovery, all of that plays an important role in ensuring that we're not setting our clients up for failure. And it does play a critical role, especially with that Achilles tendon, because we're standing up usually, and that's tendons on stress. So
yeah, and I think the other side of that, Wendy, is that if we are talking about medications, the one thing that as a personal trainer, or even you yourself as an exerciser, you want to know, okay, well, talk to the doctor, and they may or may not know some of the side effects, like you said, Wendy, with that, the weakening of connective tissue, let's just say. So one, know why they're on that medication and make sure you're not making their situation worse. But for two, the doctor may or may not know the full extent of some of the side effects that come with that medication. So there's been times where, I'll go on and do a search on a certain medication if I'm not familiar with it, outside of like beta blockers and things that, have some traditional side effects. But I want to know, okay, what else do I need to be concerned with when it comes to a medication? So this is just more of a broader understanding of understanding medication. So to your point, when it comes to the Achilles, we need to know, again, can this drug that's there to help them feel better actually make them worse?
yes,
We
definitely don't want to make them weaker.
We do not want to make them worse or weaker. But Wendy, I mean, with the Achilles, if you are, so for you as a listener on Random Fit on this episode, when we're talking about the Achilles behind every step, just, if you are experiencing some issues and you don't know what it is, go get it checked out, right? If you have a personal trainer, and make sure that, you get assessed and you get evaluated for, movement efficiencies. And if there's something going on with your foot position, your ankle position, your knee position, hips, just think, okay, well, how can this be contributing to my stress that I'm feeling in that region of the body? So Wendy, I learned a lot doing the research for this, and I appreciate your insight. But I think, it's something that, we do need to pay attention to. We oftentimes get locked in on what's happening at the low back, what's happening at the shoulders. But you know what? That part of your body that's way down there by the foot needs equal attention. So for those of you listening to both Wendy Batts and I, Ken Miller here on Random Fit, thank you so much for your time. Hope you got something out of this episode, talking about the Achilles and Achilles health. So like, follow, subscribe, download, share, give us a 5 out of 5 rating when and where you can. And more importantly, let us know what other topics you want us to talk about on other future episodes of Random Fit. So until next time, everybody, take care and be well.